Okay, welcome back, everyone. Dr. Lindney here. So let's take a look at some of the characteristics of the living human organism. So all living things have certain characteristics, right, that are going to differentiate them from non-living things. So some of the life processes in humans include metabolism. We've heard the expression he or she has a hyperactive metabolism or a hypoactive metabolism, a hyperactive thyroid or hypoactive thyroid. Metabolism is the concept of breaking things down and building things up. Anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is building up, catabolism is building down. They both fall under the term metabolism. Things are always breaking down and building up. Even in society, things break down and build up. So skin cells slough off and then you make new ones. Red blood cells die, then you make new ones. Bone cells die and then you make new ones. So it's always breaking down and making new. Being responsive, human movement, growth, cells differentiating, converting from one thing into another thing, and reproduction. All of these are basic life processes. Now, the term homeostasis is this condition of equilibrium, keeping things in a state of balance based on what's happening in the internal environment. So, homeostasis is maintained by a bunch of regulatory processes that involve interaction between your neural system and your endocrine system. It's this it's this seesaw that takes place. It's not always level, but it goes like this and then it goes like this. So maybe you eat food and then you have soda and then pasta and then ice cream and cake, and all of a sudden your blood sugar goes up and your body's like, whoa. And then your pancreas kicks in and finds a way to restore it back to normal. But if it dips too low, then your liver kicks in and says, hey, we got to raise the glucose level. So it's this dynamic state of change or equilibrium. It's not always like this. Your blood pressure shouldn't always be 120 over 80. Your oxygenation is always changing. Your beats per minute or your pulse rate may change depending on physical activity. So another thing is body fluids and homeostasis that we mentioned before. So the survival of our body cells depend on the precise regulation of the chemical composition of the surrounding fluid. So within a cell, let's see if I can draw this again for you. So here's a cell. Whoop, let me go back, my bad. Okay, so here's a cell. And let's say here's the nucleus, and let's say here's another cell with a nucleus, and then another cell with a nucleus, and another cell with a nucleus. What's happening is you have fluid within the cell, and that's called intracellular fluid. And then there's fluid between the cells, and that's called extracellular fluid. And there's this exchange from inside to outside. Okay, so the fluid is known as extracellular fluid, is outside. Inside is intracellular fluid. The other term for intracellular fluid is cytosol. Cytosol. So what's controlling homeostasis? When this PowerPoint is open on your own, you can click on these two and learn a little bit more. It's a little bit of these interactive learning tutorials from the publisher. Very helpful. So the basic components of a feedback loop is receptors, the control center, and effectors. Those are the three main parts that are involved in saying, hey, we have some sort of stimulus coming in. It disrupts homeostasis by increasing or decreasing the controlled condition. Okay, so it's going to be monitored by receptors. Receptors receive information. You have receptors on your arm, on your hand, on your fingertips. Maybe they're pain receptors, maybe they're temperature receptors. So that input comes into the control center. maybe your brain and your spinal cord, and then they're going to provide, or your endocrine system. And then it's going to provide impulses or chemical messengers to the effector, maybe to the gland, maybe to an organ, maybe to a muscle. And it alters the response. It creates a response. So in this particular example of a negative feedback loop, we have some sort of controlled condition here of blood pressure that is being disrupted, but it comes into the receptors. The receptors here in blood vessels are called baroreceptors. They're going to be determining and detecting pressure, almost like meteorologists, they'll say the barometric pressure is, right, barometric. So here the baroreceptors are detecting pressures. They're high blood pressure or low blood pressure. The input goes into the neural system, into the brain, and the brain then sends out motor commands to the heart and the blood vessels to affect both of these through chemical messengers. And then the response may be a decrease in the heart rate, or the blood vessels are going to dilate. And then it restores it back to homeostasis. So negative feedback loops are taking a particular environment. If it's high blood pressure, it's going to do the opposite, low blood pressure. If it's too low, it's going to raise it. If the blood sugar is too high, a negative feedback loop lowers it. If blood sugar is too low, a negative feedback loop is going to raise it. If you're exercising and you're huffing and puffing and you're out of breath, and then you stop exercising, having it go back to normal respiration is a negative feedback loop. But positive feedback loops, on the other hand, there aren't many in the body, but here's one of them, which is labor. So what'll happen is a woman is going to feel pain due to all of the stretch receptors in the uterus, and the woman's like, this hurts, right? But that pain is perceived by the brain, and it's going to create a hormone called oxytocin that is going to be released that's going to create more contractions, and then more contractions, more pain. More pain, more hormone, oxytocin, more contraction, more pain, more contraction, more pain, more contraction. It's the positive feedback loop is when it brings on more of the same type of feeling. It's not creating the opposite, it's bringing more on, and it brings on more pain, more pain, more contraction until delivery of the baby. That's a positive feedback loop. Here's another positive feedback loop. Okay, let's take a look. And this one could be life-threatening. So this is the inside of a blood vessel or an artery, okay? It's called the endothelial layer, or the tunica interna. And then there is this muscular layer of the blood vessel that can constrict or dilate, that smooth muscle. And then we have this elastic layer that goes all the way around. So we have three layers. There is a tunica interna, a tunica media or musculosa, and then there's the tunica externa. Now, if someone has high blood pressure, or they have high blood sugar, or they're smoking, or antibiotics overuse, NSAIDs, these things can disrupt, and high blood sugar can damage the tunica interna. So let's see if I can find the eraser here. So let's say this gets damaged right here. Then what happens is now this musculosa layer is going to invade that lumen. Now remember, the lumen was nice and round, right? That was nice and round, but now it looks like that, right? It's kind of distorted. It looks like it's crescent shaped now. So as blood is flowing through this X, right? I'll put an X there. As blood is flowing through that lumen, it's kind of turbulent. And if blood flow is turbulent, your body is going to think that you got shot or stabbed. And to stop the bleeding, your body is going to lay down fibrin. It's going to lay down this protein, this clotting protein. And this clotting protein is going to lay itself down, and it's going to keep clotting and keep creating this thrombosis, or this clotting mechanism here. And it's going to keep on happening. It's a positive feedback loop. And the only time it's going to stop is when there's no more blood going through that area, right? Because your body thinks you got shot or stabbed, so let's clot it. But in this particular case, you weren't shot or stabbed. It's just poor lifestyle choices, high blood sugar, overuse of NSAIDs, overuse of antibiotics, people that smoke, fried foods, high carbohydrates in the diet tend to damage that tunica interna. All right. So now, if this blood vessel is going to the brain and the blood can't go up, it's called a stroke. If it's going to the heart and the blood's not getting there, you have a heart attack. You see the problem with positive feedback loops? It's there to help us, but in this particular case, it could really do some damage. When homeostasis is disrupted, it's going to result in a disease or a disorder, or, as I showed you in that particular case, even death. So factors such as your genetic makeup, your genetics, your epigenetics, the air that you breathe, the food that you eat, even your thoughts that you have can affect your health. Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about some basic anatomical terminology.